Well, yeah. And
It seemed like to me.
yeah, no. And what you say points directly to a point that has come to me about these three things I stated about the war on the church, the thing that Obama said, the Democrat platform in 2016, and then what just happened at her rally. People can explain away all of those, and they do, or they try to. I guess what I find most dangerous about all three of those political intrusions into the life of the church is the very meek, mild, domesticated, virtually whispered response of the church. We see this very same kind of reticence to speak or act in the Roman Catholic Church on the issue of withholding communion from politicians who make support of abortion the absolute central theme of their political philosophies. And referring again to Archbishop Chaplain, he stated that in his book, Render Unto Caesar, he stated that withholding communion is not a punishment and is not something to be taken lightly, but it is appropriate when Catholic politicians who offer unrepentant support to abortion then come forward for a communion. And in fact, the withholding of communion is for the safety of their souls. And of course, looking back at history, who can forget the response of the church worldwide when governments demanded that churches shut down during the COVID pandemic, again, in the name of safety? All churches worldwide, with just a very small group of exceptions, clicked their heels and obediently locked their doors, denying their flock the solace of community worship, the sacraments, and pastoral care.
So let's back up a little bit. So I agree with you in general about what you just said, but you had, when you were earlier, I made a little note here, is you said freedom of religion and freedom of worship are not the same thing. Can you explain that to our listeners?
Well, sure. Freedom of religion encompasses assembly, worship, prayers, and very importantly, the living out of the tenets of your religion in your everyday life. Your everyday life in the city market square, so to speak. Your daily life at work. Your daily life in community interactions and whatnot. The freedom to worship and believe is, I guess you could kind of call that code language for the idea that you should keep your worship and your beliefs to yourself in the building or group that you're worshiping in. That when you come out into the public square, your religion has no place there, or your religious beliefs, behaviors, and whatever have no place in the public square.
So thank you for explaining that, or making the differentiation. So because while you were initially introducing the whole scheme of today's conversation, I made some notes, and one of the things to me was in the First Amendment, as we have heard quite succinctly re-explained and retaught to many people who were paying attention at rallies or listening to anything regarding the election, is that our First Amendment is it's first for a particular reason, and that is without that, you don't have the rest. You can have the others without that First Amendment, but if you destroy that First Amendment, then you stop everything. And so the First Amendment is freedom of speech, not from speech. So I am free of speaking out in the public sphere. I am free to speak right now into the airwaves. I am free to say Jesus Christ is Lord. That young man had every right to be in that grouping and speak those words. So did she have the right to say what she said.
Yep.
It's freedom of speech. But more importantly, to your distinction between religion and worship, at least maybe how I understand it, and I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I have read the Constitution, which I would encourage everyone to do, and teach your children to read it and know it, is freedom of religion is not freedom from religion. So we are free to have it. We are free to have our religion. And as you put it, like your religious behavior, how you express your religion in your daily life in this country, you are free to do so. So if you want to cover your head or not cover your head, if you want to open a door for somebody because you're loving your neighbor, you open the door. If you don't want to, you're free to do that too. But if your religion says to do A, B, or C, well, you are free to do that. But also we have freedom in the First Amendment. We have freedom of assembly. And the freedom of assembly is not just political rallies. It's freedom to assemble in church and worship. So the gathering of all of us to come together to honor the Lord as he commanded us to do, to come together. We don't come together to be fed. You know, people say, this is a sidebar. I heard it the other day. There are a lot of people say they church hop because they're not fed. They're not fed. They're going to be fed. And it was that young man that the young man that we saw the YouTube. And so he said, we're adults. When you're a child, you go somewhere to be fed. When you're an adult, you go there to serve. So you're going to church not to be fed, but to serve, which is to worship the Lord, to worship God, and not, I'm sitting here to have you give me something. I'm here to give you worship. But anyhow, back to the First Amendment. So we have a twofer, which during COVID, both got knocked out. We had no freedom of speech to speak about, hey, people, you can go to your church. Hey, priests, hey, pastors, hey, ministers, go to your church and open those doors. And we had the freedom of assembly to show up at those churches. And we had the freedom of religion to practice our faith. And that, back to the Constitution, how it is written, we believe that these rights, our amendments, our Constitution tells us that our freedom doesn't come from the president's office or the House of Representatives, that it is given to us by God, to everybody, but it is given to us by God. So God is the boss who said, you have freedom to assemble, you have freedom to speak, you have freedom to come and worship. You have those freedoms, and I'm giving them to you. I'm giving you that right, not because you earned it, not because you're this or that. It's given to you by God. So because it's given to us by God, as the Constitution was written, and I'm being constitutional rather than just in the church world, because we do live in a country of the laws of the Constitution. So if our first tenet is God is the one who gives us these rights, then God is the only one who can take them away, and not the government, much less non-elected representatives of us, but rather by decree of regulation or executive order.
And so, yes, so the Constitution, in effect, tells the federal government what it can't do. The Constitution does two things. It enumerates some basic duties of the federal government, and then it also tells the federal government what it can't do. And the Bill of Rights, in particular, is an enumeration of things it can't take away from us, like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, Second Amendment, and all of that.